Good evening and welcome to another edition of the Press Club with me, Kendall Burton, and my co-host, Mr. Earl Buski. We'll jump right in with a look at today's newspapers. The headlines from the Mirror: a new AG and a new DPP. The Voice newspaper: Botley is under scrutiny, prisoner escapes but is quickly recaptured. Chasney plans major address, reference to his planned address on the VAT, value-added tax. The Star newspaper: will new AG DPP open fresh inquest? And Lorraine Williams vows Monroe. And of course we have the usual inserts, the Tonight magazine and the Sports and Health magazine from the Star newspaper, as well as the EO from the Voice. Where we start, the new AG and new DPP, both sworn in, which has been under a tremendous external and internal pressure to have those two appointments made. Our justice system has not been in the best shape and has attracted the attention of the international community, more specifically the United States and the EU governments, especially as it applies to the appointment of the DPP, to deal with the impacts in the Lamberts cases, which have been hanging over St. Lucia and the government's head for quite a while now, and I suspect will be there for a little longer. But as we talk about the economic difficulties that the country is facing, I think a lot of people, including the media, don't make the connection between a functioning judicial system and our ability to attract direct foreign investment. That was something that was alluded to in the Prime Minister's speech at the swearing-in this week. The importance of getting the judicial system to where it ought to be. Yeah. But as we're talking about the media's coverage of it, perhaps you can jump in and.
Yeah, I think the appointment of the new AG and new DPP they can be described depending on who's making the description. It could be controversial, it could be extraordinary, they could be out of the ordinary. Certainly neither of these two new appointments are taking place in an ordinary circumstance. The new AG is appointed after the former AG was virtually begged publicly to go or before getting pushed. Go or get pushed. The new acting DPP, and we tend to not attach the appellation of acting, in my estimation, is more of a stopgap measure to ensure that that important office gets going from where it has been when the last DPP went on pre-retirement leave in March or April, because as the former acting DPP, Stephen Sixtus Brett, adequately explained this week, without a DPP, cases are stalled. If there are pleas to be made, certain things to be done to take cases to another level, a DPP has to sign, not an acting DPP. And therefore there were lots of cases that had been piling up. When Mr. Brett went in, of course, immediately within weeks there was a significant deduction in the number of cases, but there has been a significant increase since then. So with the new DPP, acting DPP, what we have is more of a stopgap measure, because there again you have a department which is allegedly understaffed, although the former Prime Minister, when he did disclose the existence of the impacts report, he indicated that he had made the necessary financial and budgeting arrangements for 3 special prosecutors if needs be. We also have the fact that in the case of the new acting DPP, it has been clearly pointed out by the Minister of National Security and everybody else that he is in for a year, 1 year. His appointment is for 1 year. And what is he expected to do during that 1 year? First, to take care of the Lamberts case. Secondly, to take care of the multitude of cases involved in the impacts report. He is also expected to ensure that he can reduce the backlog of cases that need to be processed. And we read on the front page of the Star today, will the acting new DPP open a fresh inquest? And as always, I tried to find out what it said, and there was not a word about an inquest. But it suggests, to take DBS's ad for Rick Wayne's show, it suggests here that Rick knows something that he's not yet ready to talk about. What inquests? There are several inquests. Insofar as the impacts case is concerned, it has been reported that at least 3 cases have been settled by inquests, local inquests, in terms of the inquest coming to certain findings in relation to those cases. It is suggested that on the basis of those inquests having started, it would be difficult legally to pursue the other cases without reference to those inquests. And those inquests can be used as precedents to ensure that all of the other cases either go the way of the inquest or go on their own steam. But all of that is speculation. What is not under speculation is the ability of the GPP to decide what happens with the impacts report. And again, we know that the impacts cases involved allegedly are at least a dozen. In each of those cases, you're talking about more than one person. The number of victims is more than a dozen. These have all left families that are still uncertain as to even whether to accept the official version of how their relative died, or to expect that justice will be done at some point. So all of the above definitely cannot be done in 12 months. The GPP will need at least 2 months to catch up with what is the workload, because he hasn't been in the department. So that leaves him with 10 months. 10 months, the impacts, like I said, is more than 10 cases. Then you come to the Lambert's matter, involves 57 students, some of whom have returned home. To what extent can that case be made to speed up? The whole issue of the Constitutional Review Commission, that is also being thrown on the table. Now, I'm not sure what that has to do with the GPP, but when it comes to the AG, we have...
Well, in terms of the constitutional reform, remember Kim St. Rose, the former Attorney General, is now a special advisor to the Prime Minister in that regard.
Yes,
on the way forward, right? But we're due for a break. Let's take the break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation. You're watching the Press Club. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the new appointments in the persons of Mr. Stephen Julian and Dasrian Green as the Attorney General and DPP, or Director of Public Prosecutions, respectively. And Kim St. Rose's new role now in terms of Special Advisor to the Prime Minister on the constitutional reform, which suggests, as he has promised, that constitutional reform will get serious consideration by his administration.
Yeah, that is also thrown into the mix. And again, of course, while it is good to hear that there's an intention to revive the constitutional reform, remember where it ended, being thrown out of the House basically by both sides on the basis of what I have always interpreted to be the one clause that threatened to throw the MPs, every elected MP, into this scrap heap of electoral history in St. Lucia. Of course, there are people who contend that that is not what happened, and I've asked them to explain then what happened. It was thrown out. So the actual decision taken there was that the recommendations and what was said at the House would go back to the commission, and the commission would have to wheel and come again. Now, the interesting aspect of this is that here you have the government, the Prime Minister in particular, publicly making it clear that he and his government have no trust in that DPP. In the Attorney General, Kim Centros, having been appointed by the previous administration, his cabinet did not feel comfortable with her present, and they did not trust her advice. Well, they didn't trust her advice at the cabinet level, but now they're going to trust her advice at the constitutional level. And that brings me back to what I said that Nixon had explained when it came to doing things, governments doing things. He says if it's illegal, we could do it easily. But if it's constitutional, that takes longer. And that was his explanation for the justification of breaking the law to have the Vietnam War. It was illegal, but governments can break the law.
Another story making the news this week, and the headline of The Voice, is the Bodley escape. I imagine you would have followed what happened. A prisoner by the name of
Dirty White.
Well, that's his AKA. Hanson James, 33-year-old Hanson James, was serving 2 consecutive sentences for stealing and gross indecency, 4 and 7 years, I believe. Escaped custody, I think, on Tuesday from the Bodley Correctional Facility. He was recaptured a short time after, I think it was Wednesday night, after a massive search. The media, as well as the broadcast media, as well as the social media, were credited largely for that recapture, because according to the Deputy Director, Leonard Terrence, once the news hit the social media and the broadcast media, the tips began coming in. People were reporting his sightings, people were obviously very concerned about the fact that a prisoner had escaped. And he was able to be recaptured in Montparnasse under a house. That has raised a lot of questions about the security at the Bodley. We have had Mr. Chris Felix assure us that Bodley is still a secure facility, that it was not unusual, or what has happened is not an unusual occurrence for correctional facilities across the world. But as in everything else, when situations like that happen, you're obviously forced to review your security arrangements and look for whatever loopholes that prisoner was able to use to his advantage to make good on his escape. That brings to mind to another story on the international front, which is the Julian Assange WikiLeaks issue. Because here we have a situation where you think in 2016 we've dealt with all of the loopholes as far as internet security, and now we have a situation here. Right, last week we were talking about WikiLeaks celebrating its anniversary.
10 years.
And then this week we found out that the US government has itself, who has always accused China and Russia of similar actions, has now been accused of hacking into and shutting down Julian Assange. Which raises the issue of internet security, the US elections, the vulnerability, the abuse of political power, a number of issues that we can discuss here this morning in the short time that we have. But let's talk about the Julian Assange issue. Julian Assange was taken offline this week. Friday? We had Meet the Press.
By Ecuador.
Was it Joe Biden on Friday on Meet the Press? The threat was made that Friday. They might be going after him. We had a reprisal attack by a group that has claimed responsibility by the name of the New World Hackers that has shut down several major businesses' websites, from Amazon to Reddit to PayPal. While Julian Assange has asked or suggested that maybe WikiLeaks supporters might be behind it, but regardless of who's behind it, he has appealed to them not to carry through on their threats, on their actions. There's a major concern that they plan another hit on election day in the US. All of this stemming from the release by WikiLeaks of emails from the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton, to show
Clinton's manager.
Yeah, to show a lot, basically what they consider corruption within the party.
How they stole the election from Sanders.
And it has always been Sanders' claim that Clinton was too cozy with the bankers. And here you have WikiLeaks now revealing emails and speeches by Clinton to bankers.
Secret bank speech.
That show that she's indeed very cozy with them. So now you have a a wrench being thrown into the whole thing, and you wonder now, is that going to affect the outcome of the U.S. elections?
I think it's a question that nobody has been able to answer, because technology, while it affected the Obama election, I'm not sure whether it was the technology that affected his election as much as his use of the technology. In this instance, you have the Americans accusing the Russians of trying to influence the U.S. election, accusing them of having hacked the Democratic Party, and of course accusing Julian Assange of being in their pocket, because Julian Assange's emails from WikiLeaks are affecting Clinton to the benefit of Trump. So everybody who is against Clinton is regarded as pro-Trump as the election gets closer. But again, I keep going back to the Huffington Post poll that pointed out that a very tiny percentage of Americans are influenced by the media, although that was in terms of the mainstream media. But then if you decide to be influenced by the media, whether it's the mainstream media or online media, I do not get the impression that even online media affects how people vote. It may affect what they say about where they will vote, but one of the things that came out recently, an interesting comment that was made, was that in terms of Trump's support, while Clinton's margin is growing within a minority, a smaller grouping of persons who are saying they will vote, what you have is that there are many supporters of Trump who don't want to publicly say they will vote for him. You know, because they either live around Democrats or they have Democrat friends and so on. But you're talking about the closet rednecks, you know, the poor whites, who are in the vast majority, who are looking for somebody to blame for their discontent. The racists, I mean, the Ku Klux Klan has never felt more free to say more things publicly than since Trump came around. So even the racists, when it comes to the racists in America, and the closet racists, who are more than those who are prepared to hit the road, they all support Trump. So in a situation where Mexicans or Hispanics and blacks in their great numbers normally vote Democratic, you have a situation where you have two very unlikely and very disliked candidates. The most unlikely pair of candidates who have been going up, and the third party voters. I was watching an interesting interview I want you to go and see, and that's Larry King interviewing the former mayor of Minnesota, the former pro wrestler, right? Jesse Ventura. And independents, the number of independents is growing. And I saw a very interesting statistic yesterday. 23% of young Americans between the age of 18 and 35 say they would rather a meteor hit the earth and smash it than for them to vote for either Clinton or Trump.
Yeah, we're due for a break. We'll take the break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation on the U.S. elections. Very interesting topic. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Before the break, you were talking about a recent study that suggested that young voters would prefer a meteor hit the earth than for them to vote for either of the candidates. We've already established that neither one is popular, and that this vote or this election is going to come down to votes of antipathy, basically. But you were talking about the media earlier, the fact that people don't trust the media. Would you think it applied to something like WikiLeaks, that has over the last 10 years or so exposed so much corruption, so much mismanagement, you know, that people would have more confidence and faith and trust in media outlets like WikiLeaks? And that
unfortunately there are not many like WikiLeaks.
Yeah, but there is WikiLeaks.
Yeah, there is WikiLeaks. So they would, I can see them believing what WikiLeaks says, but what WikiLeaks is doing is strengthening their conviction, which they already have, that none of them two candidates are worth it. Because WikiLeaks ain't supporting Trump. They're going after Clinton. But one of the uncertainties facing America is that America is going to be in trouble no matter which one of them wins. I mean, Trump is going to want the nuclear button on his desk from the next morning to try it. Clinton is going to undo most of the good that Obama has done. She's already unwilling to give any particular pledges. She has one of the WikiLeaks things showed she had no, it wasn't a WikiLeaks, it was a leak in the States itself, because the leak thing, everybody leaking. Leak something Trump said 5 years ago in a bus, and a fella just get fired now, 5 years later. There was a leak of Mrs. Clinton having met with top black leaders 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they were going head over heels trying to get her to be straight, to be clear about what she intends to do, about the problems that they were putting to her, and saying, we're not just giving you the problems, we're giving you the solutions as well. This is what has failed, this is where we are, and this is what we think you need to do, and we will be with you. And she is so vague in her response that one of them, who was unnamed because it was a White House campaign report, the people who spoke were not named, so the particular black leader was not identified. But he jumped all over and said, listen, how do you want our votes, and you don't even want to come out and tell us you're going to do this or you're not going to do that? Cuba, I mean, the Americans who want to do business with Cuba, who know that Obama has done everything he has been able to do without being able to convince the Congress to raise the blockade against Cuba. Last week, he removed certain economic sanctions, some more economic sanctions. And yesterday, I read that Cuba and the United States have agreed to work jointly on some issues. Now, you don't get that kind of news where US and Cuba have agreed to work jointly on something. The only thing I know they used to cooperate on was the weather. But things are happening. But neither President Obama nor anybody else has been able to get Mrs. Clinton to say that she is going to lift the embargo.
Yeah, but did you expect any different? It's an election, we're days away from the election, and we spoke last week about pandering. Right now, she's in a precarious position. I mean, will she risk any gains that she has made?
She can't lose
by committing either way.
She can't lose on the Cuba thing. Obama won Miami, won Florida. For the Democrats won Florida under Obama in the last presidential race for the very first time in decades, because of the Cuba policy. The young American-born Cubans are democratic because the young Cubans in Florida, who are in the majority now, they want to be able to go to Cuba to see their grandpeople.
That's just one issue.
But Florida, what's his name? Gore had the majority of the vote, and he lost in Florida. You know, so she has nothing to lose by saying that she's going to lift the blockade. On the 28th of this month will be the 25th consecutive year in which Cuba has presented a resolution at the United Nations in New York to be discussed. And this 28th, on International Creole Day, while we observing Journée Creole here, Friday the 28th, the foreign ministers and ambassadors of the world. All UN member states will be in New York. And Cuba will be moving that resolution for the 25th time. And for the last 20 times, you only have 2 or 3 at most supporting the resolution. United States, Israel, and one of those Indian Ocean countries, Kiribati, Vanuatu, or one of them. Only 3 versus 180 something. But it has never been lifted because it is not in the strategic interests of the multinational corporations. And therein is why Mrs. Clinton would not want to think, because corporate America.
And there you go, because it's
corporate
she's not in a strategic interest either. It's not in a strategic interest. But interestingly, as we've spoken about over the last few programs, some of the historic aspects of this election. Another one emerging this week after the final debate. We've talked about the fact that debates generally don't sway voters. But these last 3 debates have shown significant changes in the polls afterwards. In the first one, I think it was 1.5. The second one, a difference of, I think, 5.6. And the final one, 7.1. That's a major difference.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at, I stayed up. I had 2 choices that night. I waited for the dawn and the dim. And I came to a conclusion that somebody else doing the summary later also came to in the States, that if Trump had said what he said in the last debate, in the first debate, you might have been seeing a difference in the figures. Because in the last debate, the 2 of them were led to and forced to address issues. Trump, unlike the 2 earlier debates, was more clear as to where he stood on the different issues. And the growler in that one was Mrs. Clinton. I think in the last debate she wanted to show the world that, well, not only Trump, you know, can be a Trump. And she went after him. They went after each other. I saw a big article in The Voice today. Somebody said, which of them won?
The brawl.
Yeah, the brawl.
Yeah, but
by Mr. Kennedy.
I thought of Peter Josie after that earlier discussion about his article, that she was weak, she wasn't aggressive enough.
She must have read it.
But no, it's not just that. You know, I think the lack of aggression, I think, was a part of a deliberate strategy on her part that worked to her advantage in all 3 debates. You know, the very things that she's been criticized about, she has used to her advantage. Her sex, her gender, the fact that she's a woman, the fact that she's calm, that she's
good.
She's been called over prepared. She's been called all kinds of things.
She's good at it.
Exactly.
And I'm very critical of her. You know, I'm not sure I would vote for her if I was voting in America. I wouldn't vote for Trump, but certainly, I mean, I would have to be convinced a day before the election that I really have to go,
so you'd be one
or that she would need my vote. You know, I would take a solution position and say, she really need my vote. She go in anyway. But whoever wins, as I was saying earlier, and when we look at the debates, the difference between all previous debates and this one is that it is the nastiest. It's the one that has evaded everything that touches people. None of them touch climate change. None of the debates. Here you had Hillary Clinton fanning the flames of war in terms of her attitude to the Russians, accusing Russia of everything from hacking into the thing to wanting to mash up NATO. And here you have a situation today where Hillary Clinton is accusing Trump of trying to mash up NATO, when all Trump has said is that given the amount of money the United States is pouring into NATO as the biggest contributor, and it is not even located in Europe, and with the most arms, that he would want to see more bang for his bucks. That's what he says. He didn't say he's closing down NATO. He's saying that more NATO countries have to put more money into NATO's military budget so that he could have more money to spend in America. Yet, on the other hand, Mrs. Clinton is saying, no, he's working for Putin. He's Putin's friend. You know, and Putin is just there laughing because Britain is in trouble in Brexit. The US is in a pre-election bind. The European Union is it cannot come around until the Brexit thing goes through. In the Philippines has broken with the United States and embraced Russia and China. And I mean, you go around the world and things are not like they used to be. So the geopolitical analysis, if we look ahead and try and see where the world is heading, you need steady hands at the White House. But I think I ain't see no steady hands yet. I think Obama, did you get to see his brother? Did Trump, you know, Trump said he was going to bring Obama's brother. You saw him?
No. We do for a break. We'll take it when we come back. Our final segment, we'll wrap up our conversation on the U.S. elections and touch on some local issues. Junior Creole.
Yeah.
We'll be right back. Welcome back. Our final segment on the Press Club. It would be remiss of us if we didn't touch on Junior Creole. A lot of stuff has been happening for Creole Heritage Month throughout October. Private sector, public sector. You see interestingly, this week I saw a very interesting video somebody sent me from a young artist I had not heard about before called Omega. I don't know if you've seen it. I sent it to you. Doing one of Sessen's songs. You know, a more modern version of it. And I'm filled with a lot of pride when I see things like that. I look at how many activities are happening around Junior Creole, you know, and I feel good about it. But I'm a little concerned because you wonder how much of it is because people just feel like it's the hip, cool thing to do now, to dress in madras and to participate in these activities without the understanding, the knowledge that goes with the participation in Creole Heritage Month for what being Creole really means. You know, that's one of my concerns. When we look at the Barbono Secondary School this week, they hosted some students from Guadeloupe, and we heard two of the teachers saying the Guadeloupean students were surprised, you know, at some of the stuff that we were doing, and you think that wouldn't be the case considering that we have a shared Creole heritage, you know. But it's interesting, and you wonder how much of those activities that the students are engaged in that other people are doing is because it's compulsory. School is doing it, so we're part of it. But beyond that, you know, have we embraced our Creoleness, our Creole heritage, do you believe?
I think you should read Rochelle Gonzalez on Tuesday. She had an article, or last Saturday. She had a very interesting article in which she started out saying, listen, Creole days are her nightmare. Junior Creole season is her nightmare. For some of the reasons that you pointed out there, that she doesn't see people taking out of it what it is intended to be, but just wanting to be there to identify with the colors, take the pictures, and eat the food, but to just be Creole for a day or for a month. I think that is quite true, and the planners need to take cognizance of the need to infuse the month of celebrations with the sort of activism and the sort of activity that would drive home what Creole really is to us.
Does the media have a role in that?
Pardon?
Yes,
the media has a role, and like I said, that's why I recommended Rochelle's article, because she was saying, listen, she only goes out as a media person to cover, and I would want to know how other media persons see it too, because our coverage tends to be what we saw and what we heard, without any critical analysis, without us giving our own opinions on how we feel. We tend not to do that. The average reporter tends not to do that, and that's where Rochelle, Stan, and a couple of others in other places, you know, depart. But there's still a few and far between. What I have seen, this is going to be the 34th year of celebration of Junior Creole here, and in the 34 years, like I've said, we still end up in a place where the theme for this year is Kuela Mache, Kuela Kamache. After 30 years, Kuela Tipa Sipose Kakui. And I think when you look at the calendar of activities, Journée Creole is our biggest fete nationally. The longest and widest celebrations are for Moi Héritage Creole. The National Reparations Committee has infused an aspect this year that we're hoping will be able to, I'm putting on another hat right here, that the committee is hoping will become an annual affair, and that is to draw the link between Creole and reparations, both having emerged from slavery. And we have a number of school lectures and community lectures that have been taking place. And to the welcome surprise of most of the lecturers, the students, yes, we have a tendency of saying they know nothing, they know about slavery, they know. There's a reason for that. They're not taught. There's nothing about colonialism in their history books. So they don't. But when you give them the facts, the dates, the names, the things that happened, and where we are, and why we are where we are, they become enthusiastic and they want to learn more about reparations. What's the difference between reparations and repatriation? You get all of the questions coming up. I did a lecture at the Odson School on Thursday, and the youth there were all students below 18, with the exception of one guy who must have been over 30. But they wanted to know who was John Quinlan. Where can they get information about Ivan van Sertima? Because I was telling them how he has been able to prove so much that is not said and written about the contribution of African civilization to human civilization today. You also have, coming with that, a series of activities on Saturday, on Friday and Saturday. On Journée Creole, there'll be a youth forum at the Castries City Hall, where again the idea is to introduce young persons, because CARICOM wants these reparations activities to be concentrated on youth. So at the City Hall on Journée Creole itself, we'll be there with young persons from around the island, making the link between Creole and reparations, but also starting the process of involving them in the discussion of reparations and Creole. And you'd find when I draw the link between Creole and our flower festivals, Margaret and Laos, you know, and them having emerged from slavery, two sets of questions came up. The younger persons wanted to know why Margaret and Laos always quarreling. You know, and I was able to give them an answer that go and listen properly, and you'll see they ain't really quarreling. You know, they're quarreling, it's all about love and peace and so on. But there was a theme and there was a reason, because the celebrations were meant to mislead the planters and the slave owners. The elderly person who was there, which is a question that normally comes, will reparations ever happen? Will I live to ever see that? And there was also the question of, since we are saying that Creole and Margaret and Laos came from slavery, why are we embracing them? You know, and I was able to point out that, listen, they weren't created by slavery, they were created as a response to and as a means of dealing with the fact that, you know, slavery brought Africans here, mixed them up, they didn't have a language, and they needed to find a way to communicate, and that's how they came up with Creole. Similarly, that the Laos and Margaret were festivals that were being engaged in to plan revolution, to the extent that they were banned from the church They were banned by the churches until in the 70s when Monsignor Anthony and the Folk Research Center and other priests did enough work to get. That was when the Creole started to marcher. You know, our present Governor General was Dr. Paulette Louisi. She was a teacher, a principal, and she headed the group called Mouvement Creole. And she, like many of us, went to all corners of the country trying to explain to people why we need to embrace Creole. Father Patrick Anthony was not the most popular priest, you know, in the Catholic community because of his insistence on even preaching, saying the Mass in Creole. You know, the people, MacDonald Dixon. You know, we see these people and we know them as Monsignor, Governor General, Deputy Governor General. They all planted something to get Creole to where it is today. And the link between Creole and reparations, when I said that the Creole and in the post-slavery period, slaves had to develop in order to adapt to the new situation. So tomorrow, in Jacmel, there's a Wooly Laba competition. What is Wooly Laba? It is a creolization of cricket in ways and means that the average cricketer from abroad will not be able to play. You know, the tools, the planes, we go to the exhibitions and we look at the planes and so on that are made out of pure wood. Because one of the principles during the slavery period was, and in the period after slavery as well in the colonies, was a direct order from Whitehall that there should be no manufacturing, not even a nail must be produced in these islands. They must simply be producers of raw materials to be exported to Europe. So that, I mean, you couldn't go and buy a plane, so you had to make a plane and create the sharp elements from. So creativity has shown itself, and Creole has to be seen as a tool, as a communications tool, as a language, as the embodiment of a culture, the ocean within which a culture flows. And unfortunately, while you have over 7 million Creole speakers in Haiti and a couple 100,000 in Dominica, St. Lucia, Martinique, Guadeloupe, and Cayenne, the disconnect between us and the French that was seen in Babonneau, when the Guadeloupean children were pleasantly surprised to not only know we were speaking patois like them, but to see that we were doing we had many of the same cultural practices. I think we need to do more of that. As we speak, Creole is being taught in universities in Martinique, Guadeloupe, and Cayenne. It has been for the last 25 years. How many St. Lucians have benefited from that? Some have, but not enough in my view. What are we doing to import those sound Creole university courses into St. Lucia?
Well, the Folk Research Center has, through the Harold Simmons Academy, started with the schools. An important part now of the Folk Research or the Creole Heritage Month is the educational component, teaching people how to read and write Creole. We've had an author recently publish a book entirely in Creole, so we're getting there.
We're getting there. There's a Anupali column in The Voice every Tuesday. We're getting there, but we're walking still. We need to at least try to trot. You know, if not run. There are things we can do slowly. There are things, of course, this brings into the question, the FRC can only do that much insofar as bringing up educational ideas and engaging in educational activity. But for Creole to get its real place in St. Lucia, alongside English, the Ministry of Education, the state, has to intervene. That hasn't happened since 1997 when we were declared bilingual, and in the period between then and now we still have a situation where Creole is still the bastard tongue in many instances. I mean, it's spoken, it is referred to, it is revered, but it is not taught in schools, and it is not being used in the ways and places that matter. Like you said, somebody has produced a book entirely in Creole. Young people are producing Creole versions or new young versions of old music. I have a very interesting one we're hoping to be able to produce in the Derek Walcott Square at the Youth Reparations Rally also next Saturday, because there's going to be a relay with the reparations battle around the city, and a rally in the square on Saturday afternoon. And one of the things that we're hoping to be able to show there is the need for us to be able to do more to take the language from where it is to one that young people will not only feel proud speaking it, but will want to research and know how it came about. I think if we know how it came about, we will better understand and appreciate it. But curriculum development needs to come in here. Ministry of Education has to look at curriculum development not only as it relates to Creole, but also as it relates to our history as Caribbean people. As the reparations movement is showing, our history has not yet been written by us for us to read.
Absolutely. We're out of time, unfortunately, but we'll be back here next week, hopefully.
Certainly.
You'll join us as well. I want to say a special good evening to Miyuki Tanaka, our Japanese viewer who tunes in every Saturday. Thank you for tuning in, and thanks for the rest of you for tuning in. We'll be back in next week.
Not a week passes where people tell me, boy, I'm waiting for you on Kendall on Saturday night.
Yeah.
Good night, folks.